Okay, start Siman Kuf Tzadik Aleph. Even though really parts of the things that are relevant are in Siman Kuf Tzadik. I'm going to give an introduction, which is not from Shulchan Aruch. The Consolidated Laws of New York State, Chapter 24A, Section 5-703. There is 24-A, Section 5-703. And that is something which is called a statute of frauds, a law regarding frauds. That is enshrined in the laws of New York State, which is that although according to New York State law, a oral contract is valid for many things, any transfer of real estate or a rental that's for more than a year or more, cannot be transferred from one person to another without a signed contract which has the signature of the makna, the person who transfers it. Yeah, you can't. It's a statute of frauds. Which means that when you look at Chukei HaMedina, Mokim Shenohagu, with a shtar, which is what was discussed in Siman Kuf Tzadik, Kesef is not enough. In New York State, that is the law. B'meila, in this state, there's no other kinyan which works other than this one. There's an interesting tshuva from Rabbi Moshe, which I don't remember the Mona Mokim now, where it discusses regarding rentals, and it says when you sign a standard lease, everybody signs a standard lease, you're mekabel upon yourself the laws of New York State which govern the lease, even if certain things are not going to be according to Allah. Same thing applies when you sign. There's a standard documents of transfer of ownership of properties in New York. You sign such a document, you're mekabel upon yourself the tanoim of New York State. Otherwise, it doesn't work. In Siman Kuf Tzadik, I'm going to go through a summary of some things in Siman Kuf Tzadik, then we'll go to Kuf Tzadik Aleph, then we'll go another few nekudas from Kuf Tzadik and back to Kuf Tzadik Aleph. Siman Kuf Tzadik starts by telling you a karka could be nikne with kesef, shtar, chazake, and kinyan agav sudar. Sif Beis, that a kinyan kesef is enough to transfer ownership. Yeah, that's what it seems like. But jump to Sif Zayin, and it says that kinyan kesef only works for transfer of ownership when it's a place where the minig is not to write a shtar. But any place where the minig is to write a shtar, there's absolutely no kinyan until a shtar is written. What's the reason why a shtar is needed? It says, Rashi in Kiddushin Daf Chavav Amud Aleph, that in a place where everybody writes a shtar, then there is no smichus das from the purchaser to complete the transaction until he knows that he has a shtar in his hand, which is going to confirm his purchase. And the Rashba over there adds, maybe also mitzad the moicher. The moicher is not completing the sale until he has a shtar which is signed, he signs a shtar. The Imrei Bina and Kinyonim Siman Chav Beis adds a point over here that if the koine had no smichus das to purchase it, then obviously the moicher also had no smichus das to sell it, because to make a transfer, buy and sell, you have to have one person who agrees to buy and one person who agrees to sell. So if the buyer is not ready to purchase it without a shtar, because he doesn't want to just put his money down and then be left hanging, then the moicher never really also does no smichus das. And therefore, in a place where the minig is to write with a shtar, there is no kinyan unless a shtar is written. Now, what happens is this. Do we say that in a place that you write a shtar, the kinyan is needed, and without the shtar is needed, and without it there's no kinyan? midiraisa, midirabanan. Yeah, because we have this discussion in other kinyanim. Sometimes you have a kinyan that works midiraisa and doesn't work midirabanan. So Minchas Chinuch and Mitzvah Shin Lamed Vav says that when there is no smichos das midiraisa, there's no kinyan, and therefore, if there's a place where you write a shtar, if there's no kinyan, if there's no shtar, midiraisa, there's no kinyan. But the Beis Yosef for the beginning of Siman Reish Dalad, which we learned last week, says that there is mishapara when somebody gives money to buy karkois in a place where the minig is to write a shtar. There is mishapara. Means there is smichus das. And over there it's mashma, it's minat Torah. It does work. Why? The Beis Yosef clearly writes, that you know to a shtar and they gave money and there was a money given. This misha bakarkos is mishapara bakarkos, and the Beis Yosef writes because minat Torah mois koines. It's talking about a place that there is. So it's mashma from the Beis Yosef that midiraisa kinyan ischal even in a place where shtares are needed. At the moment the money is transferred. What's enough? We'll call it. We can't make a machlikas in Minchas Chinuch and the Beis Yosef because they're so many hundreds of years apart. But between these two svaras, you have Rishonim which are going to go in either direction. If it's a place where you wrote a shtar, and they didn't write the shtar yet, the money was already transferred, and then they both agree that there's no need for a shtar anymore, we're meichel the requirement of a shtar. They both agree, listen, we trust each other, we're meichel the requirement of a shtar. The meicher is meichel that he doesn't need to write a shtar. The kohen is meichel that he doesn't need a shtar. So now, if midiraisa kinyan happened, b'shas matan mois, and only midirabanan we made a takon like the Beis Yosef, only midirabanan they made a takon that mois are not kohenes without a shtar, then A, you don't need another kinyan. B, the property belongs to him retroactively from that moment. But, maybe Siman is not koine, like the Minchas Chinuch. That there is no kinyan until the shtar is written, then you need a new kinyan instead, because mois are not koines. So therefore, you need some form of kinyan at this moment when they made an agreement. Yeah. So then comes another nafkamina, comes derivative of this one. If somebody was chayzer after the mechila, they were moichel that you don't need a shtar, and then one of them says, you know what? I'm not interested in following through with the sale. The seller says, I changed my mind. Here, take your money back. So if now that there's no shtar, the kinyan of mois, we follow the deraisa one, there's no need for any other takans chachamim, then he doesn't get a mishapara. The kinyan is there, he can't retract. But if we say that midiraisa there is no kinyan, and now there was a mechila, and therefore something happened over here, could be there's a mishapara, could be there is a mechus ramana. Yeah, could be mishpara, could be mechus ramana. Now, the moicher says, take your money back, I'm not interested I'm done. But let's go back to where regular standard one, the money was given, and there was no shtar. So if money was given and there's no shtar, the moicher technically could change his mind. Right? That's a Pischei Tshuva and Siman Kuf Tzadik Sivkot and Hey writes. Why? Because Lakeach wasn't koine yet. We're going to a discussion, Mishapara yes, Mishapara not, but technically he could retract. But now let's go a little bit deeper into the kinyan for a second. When does the ownership actually kick in? So let's say they gave money on a Tuesday and they wrote the shtar on Thursday. What happens when you write the shtar? The Ran in Kiddushin, the Ran on the Rif in Kiddushin Daf Yud Amud Aleph says that the kinyan is chal at the moment the shtar is written, and not at the moment the money is given. which seems to imply that the Ran holds that the moment the money is given means nothing. It's only the shtar is what makes a transfer of ownership.
Is the shtar for the money?
Wow. If the shtar is for the money, is later in the Siman. Is it a shtar oido? Is it a shtar? You have an asivus on that. So we'll get to it when we get to Sif Gimel. The Ritva on Gittin Daf Yud Amud Aleph says that the kinyan happens when now the kinyan becomes retroactively from the moment the money was given. So the kinyan doesn't happen when the shtar is given. When the shtar is given, it creates a retroactive kinyan to the moment the money was given. What's all these nafkaminas over here? You think is that what's the many nafkaminas could come out of it? Simplest nafkaminas that could come out of it is if something happens between one and the other. Who is responsible? Today, when you have
Talking about Kaka, right?
Kaka, today when you have liability, somebody falls in front of on your sidewalk. Whose insurance gets sued? Yeah, it's just simple. You look at who's the owner. So now, if you go retroactively, who's achroi? The one before. Whoever got hurt. Yeah. If we go into that discussion, if the Chal Pi Halacha there's such a thing that Yechayev, but that's a separate discussion. I'm not going to go into it. I'm talking about if the kinyan kicks in at that moment, when does the kinyan kick in? Something happens to the field afterwards. Who do we say if the field got flooded? The stachva sadeyu of who? Stachva sadeyu of the guy who gave the money and didn't have the shtar yet, or nistachva sadeyu retroactively taflak on those 2 days. You can't do anything about it. The shtar was written. Yeah, that's it. Those are the nafkaminas between the Rishonim. Now, there's a marit. Mispat Siman Samach Vov. We'll put this topic aside for a second. That if you're in a place where the minig or the law is that every transfer of property is registered in those days, it was called the tabu, and it's also still called the tabu. In America, it's in the land registry, and in New York, it's called Acris, and other places, it's called something else, it's land registry. And as long as it's not written in the land registry, it's not a kinyan. Even if they wrote a shtar, and even if money was given and everything else. Why? Because if you're in a place where the transfer of ownership for the lekeach is confirmed at the moment it's registered officially, then the lekeach was not samach daitoi until he knows that it's registered. If it's not registered, it's not samach daitoi in it. And the Mishpat Shalom says in Sifkat Vav, that if a lashon was written in the shtar, that it's mashma from it, that they waive the registry requirement, and they're not making a big issue out of it, then the kinyan happens right away at the shtar. Right, now what are we talking about over here? Obviously we're talking about a shtar kinyan, not a shtar raya. What's the difference between a shtar kinyan and a shtar raya? Shtar kinyan means that the sale is confirmed at the moment the shtar kinyan is written. If it's only shtar raya, that the minig is that you write a shtar raya that a transaction has taken place. That means a receipt of sorts that this money was given for this purpose, and not that the shtar creates the kinyan, like until now. So according to the Ran, who he holds that by a shtar kinyan, the shtar is what creates the transfer. Over here, shtar raya, he's not going to hold that a shtar raya creates the transfer. A shtar raya creates a retroactive transfer at the time of Mois. Because to write a shtar raya, you need a shtar raya to effectuate the kinyan. But the kinyan only happened at the time the money was transferred, so it goes back to the time of the money. And what's an afkamina when the kinyan is chal? Well, not an afkamina. Could the seller use the money between? Right? If the seller uses the money, He got money, and then he had some mokim shikos and shtaraya, and he used the money and for something. And then afterwards, the shtaraya was written, and retroactively the kinyan got kicked in. So he didn't do anything wrong, retroactively. Why? Because the money was his. If it's in a place where you write a shtar kinyan, and he used the money. So according to the Ran, he used money, it's not his. According to the Ritva, since even by shtar kinyan it goes retroactively, the money that he used is his, and he didn't do anything wrong with it. Huh?
If you say shtar raya, you're trying to apply the shtar raya to these two cases?
Now, if somebody,
The Ran did it, right?
I'm not saying the first,
If it's retroactively or not?
if somebody used, no, by shtar raya, by shtar kinyan you have a machlekes.
Yeah.
When does it
Shtar raya
happen?
is not-
Huh?
Shtar raya is not shtar kinyan.
No, by shtar raya, even the Ran holds that it goes retroactively.
To what? To prove that it's not made, doesn't make it shtar raya, doesn't make it kinyan.
The money makes the kinyan.
But shtar raya is only a raya, so what do you mean?
Exactly, but until you have the shtar raya, the kinyan is hanging.
The makim should not go look at shtar, you brought a shtar raya enough for the shtar.
Waarom is nog niet only shtar raya?
Makim should not look at shtar means a shtar raya.
Waarom is niet licht shtar could mean shtar kinyan or shtar raya? Right?
Shtar
If
raya.
it's mokum, if it's mokum shenagu licht shtar raya, then when does the kinyan happen? According to everybody, the chayra should happen when the money is given. Elamai, until the shtar raya is written, the kinyan is in the air. And when the shtar raya is signed 2 days later, it retroactively works to get a kinyan to the day when the money was given.
Doesn't everyone agree that, again, we're talking about kinyan kesef here.
Yeah.
I'm not a makim should look at shtar, you have to write a shtar. Shtar is definitely not a shtar kinyan. We're always talking about shtar raya.
No, talking about shtar kinyan. Well, otherwise, the whole kuf tzadik aleph goes out the window.
So aleph is.
About moicher sada and pnei rasa. What does it mean? What's a shtar raya that he did what?
No, the Kufsadik Aleph is you actually clean it with a shtar.
And what's a kinyan shtar in kuf tzadik?
Tzadik is Kesef and a shtar, right?
That's only if it's a mokum that is kesef plus a kin plus a shtar. But if it's a place where you only do a shtar kinyan, the kuf tzadik will be the same thing. There could be places, depends on what the minig is to write in the place, to do in the place. So I'm explaining to you. Some things apply to kuf tzadik and kuf tzadik aleph. I'm not talking specifically about what Siman now. Telling you there's places where the kinyan is a shtar kinyan, and therefore there's a machlekes rishonim. What happens at the shtar kinyan moment? Does it retroactively create a shtar? Does it retroactively create a kinyan to the moment the money is given? Or does the shtar kinyan begin the kinyan at that moment? And when you have a shtar raya, the question is, what happens at the shtar raya? Does it create a retroactive shtar or not? You have two kinds of shtaris. Then you have kinyan kesef. Kinyan kesef sometimes comes together with a shtar raya. Sometimes kinyan kesef is nothing unless you have a shtar kinyan. So comes kuf tzadik aleph, where the mechaber starts by saying, how do you sell a field through a shtar? That if he says, and in Sif Beis is going to tell you that it's talking about moicher sodom ipnei ra'asa, which we're going to get to soon, the whole Isle of Nafik Azuzah discussion, which is also based on Kuf Tzadik. I'm going to summarize it for you soon, but let's just first put that aside for a second. Mechaber starts by saying, how do you purchase a field with a shtar? He says you write on a piece of paper, or on a piece of cheres, or on a leaf, that this field was transferred, gifted, sold to Pliny and Pliny. Then the field is gifted and or sold to Pliny and Pliny, even if there's no edim. The Smer right away tells you what's the chiddush of cheres and ole and a leaf, even though these are things that roylis daif. And we know the sugya, whoever learned Chishtaris knows that in Chishtaris shtar roylis daif. And whoever learned Ilchis Gittin knows also in Gittin we have a discussion if you're allowed to write on something which is roylis daif or not. which we learned last year. So the Smeh right away points out, he says, even though cheres and oler are something which is royalist daif, which could be forged, and therefore in Hilchos Shtares we say you cannot write a shtar chayv on it, still in all, over here it's not a problem. Why is it not a problem? Because over here it's not a shtar chayv, it's shtar mechire. Shtar chayv is meant to last until the payment, until the chayv is paid back. So it has to be l'man yamdu yamim rabim. It has to last for a long time. So you can't put it in davar rolis daif because it could be erased, it could be changed, it could be whatever. But a shtar mechire is not a problem because shtar mechire is only for today. It's only for a transfer. This shtar mechire, this kinyan is only for today. Therefore, it's kosher. The Gra points out over here that it's because that the leaf has no value, and it still works. And this comes from the Tur. It's two different reasons. Well, the reason why the Smeh doesn't bring the reason of doesn't mention Bechlal what the Tur says that it's because it has no value. Yeah, it doesn't mention. Because in certain things you have to have a value. There's a whole nafkamina when it comes to if it has a value. Shtar chayv is a value, yeah. Now, the Nesivis goes into a discussion. The K'tzos, Machlekes K'tzos and Nesivis says later on, and the Nesivis over here, whether the shtar has to belong to the person who's giving it to you, to the makna. We know the sugya from Gittin, that the Kosav law, that the get has to belong to the husband, the paper, the ink, and the payment to the sofer has to be also from the husband, and if he doesn't pay, then the wife pays, and aknu, the sofer, or makne, the money to the sofer. But over here the Nesiva says that the shtar taka has to belong to the makna, like in Gittin. But when it comes to schara sofer, it doesn't have to. Why? Because by a get, the reason why it has to be from the husbands is because of the din of a kosav, that everything has to be from the husband. But over here it's not like that. And he brings a raya, he brings a raya to it. And then he says, and even if you want to say that it has to be from the husbands, we have the shit of the Ramban, that Chachamim were makne, the schara sofer to the makne. So it works. This was written against the K'tzas, because the K'tzas on Sifkot Aleph, which is on Sif Gimel, says no, everything has to be because of the makna, and there's no takana like by a get that we were makna the schara sofer to the makna, and if the buyer is the one who pays for the shtar, then this is not a shtar kinyan, but it's only a shtar raya, and therefore it would not work for the purposes of this siman. And that's why the Nesivis writes, explaining why he doesn't like what the K'tzas writes. And if you have time, look in Avnei Choshen, where he farentfers the kasha of the Nesivis on the K'tzas, and he explains why the K'tzas is still right. It has to be. Everything has to be Mishal HaMakna, and if it's not that, it becomes a shtar raya. And the Nesivis disagrees and says, no, it doesn't have to. It's not like a get. It's not like a get. Now, Rabbi Kiva Eger says a very interesting point over here on the side. He says, what happens if a shliach sells the property of the Meshaleach, but instead of signing on the shtar the name of the Meshaleach, he says plain and plainly b'shem this and this guy, he just signs his name. Now goes the buyer and does his research, and he finds out that this field belongs to that guy, to somebody else, and that guy appointed this guy as a shliach to sell it. So the signature of the shliach that he was appointed to sell it should work. Kivega says no, it doesn't work. It's not enough unless the shliach cannot sign a shtar kinyan with his own name and let the koine figure out who the real moicher is. Now let's go back a second. We did mention that the Smeh says that something which is roilis daif, there's no problem whatsoever. Why? Because it doesn't have to stay yomim rabim. The Bach has a long Bach, which he says the Chayra, writing on Davar Lizdayef, only works if it's Ksav Yodoi Shel Moicher, the Ksav Yad of the seller, because then it's something which can be Mizdayef. But if it's Eidim or a Sofer who writes the shtar on this piece of Cheres, then it doesn't work unless you have Eidim Mesireh. The Taz, who's the son-in-law of the Bach, says that based on the Smeh's understanding, there's no place for the question of the Bach. If you look in the Erech Shai in Sifkot Nalef says that brings in the name of the Tumim, that only if it's in Ksav Yodoi or Chasimosoi, he adds a little bit more, then it works, not like the Smeh. If it's not like that, then it doesn't work. It has to be either Ksav Yad of the seller or the signature of the seller in something which is Roy Lizdayef.
Who said it? Who brings it to him?
Erech Shai. That's why he's Machriya. Not like a Smeh. Let's move weiter. The Smeh over here says that if we're talking about a Matana, there's no difference if he's nice in the Matana because it's a bad field or it's a good field. By Mechire, it's only in Moicher Pnei Rasa, like we're going to see in the next sif. So therefore, why were they both mentioned over here together? Once he mentioned Mechire, he mentioned Matana also. But really, by Mechire only applies by Moicher Pnei Rasa, and that's pretty clear in the next sif. What's the reason why by Moicher Pnei Rasa you don't need a shtar kinyan is enough? Very simple. Moicher Pnei Rasa is the seller is selling it because he wants to get rid of it fast. It's a bad field. And he doesn't want the seller to change his mind. So in his mind, the buyer to change his mind. So he's happy to take a shtar right away, let's transfer it, get it off his hands as fast as possible. The guy shouldn't have a chance to change his mind.
Pnei Rasa is different. Pnei Rasa is different than Kavetz also, right?
Yeah, an Isle of Anofak, yeah. Now, when you look in the Beis Yosef, he brings Machlekes Rishonim. He says, according to Tosfos and Deran, that even by Moicher Sodim Pnei Rasa, there's no kinyan without giving money, even if there is a shtar. But he says, but according to the Rambam, there is a kinyan even without money by Moicher Mipnei Rasa. And he makes a machlekes between the Tosfos and the Ran and the Rambam. And the Tur Paskin like the Rambam. And the Drisha goes at a big length to explain why, even according to the Tosfos and the Ran, it also works. Even also, you don't need a transfer of money. And he says he explains how the Tur understood them to be able to create that there should not be a machlokes between, that the Tur should not have to be machri and a machlokes rishonim, but all the rishonim fit into one category. He says, and that's why the Tur didn't go into a whole discussion bringing a machlokes. He just did it with pshitas. Moicher Sadeh with shtar kana. Now, what happens if you sell a field that's not mipnei rasa, not because it's a bad field? It's not enough to have a shtar. So Mechaber writes it in Sif Beis pretty clearly, and you also have to give money along with it. And the Smeh says over here something interesting, that you have to give all the money. Now, the lashon of the Tur and the Mechaber is not that you have to give all the money. It's that sheet and damen could be part of the money. Maybe it means it's talking about doesn't give any money at all. The Smeh takes it a pshitus. What are we talking about over here? That if Moicher Sadeh not because of Rasa, then all the money has to be paid. And until all the money is paid, there is no, even with a shtar, there's no kinyan. And he says, where does he know it from? You look in Siman Kuf Tzadik, Sif Tezayin, what the Ramah says over there. So let's summarize here what it says in that Siman. Mechaber in Siman Kuf Tzadik. I'm going to go quickly through a bunch of points from Sif Yudalef through Sif Tezayin. Mechaber in Sif Yud Aleph says, someone who sells a field in Pnei Ra'asa, because it's bad, he didn't yet receive money, and he's Ayel v'nafik azuz, he's busy chasing the buyer to pay. If it's Moicher Sodom Pnei Ra'asa, because it's bad, the Keach was already kinda, even if he didn't give a penny. Why? Because the seller wants to get rid of it as fast as possible so the Keach doesn't change his mind. When the Keach suddenly discovers that he was sold something which is not as great as he thought originally. Obviously, we're not talking about the Zemekachtos, but when the buyer might have second thoughts about it. Even though usually, by Ayel v'nafek azuzeh, when somebody sells something and then is desperate for cash and he's busy chasing the buyer to pay for it, the kinyan is not completed until he pays. It's in Sif Yud it's written. It's not considered a full mechira. It's also in Sif Yud Daled. And what is in Sif Yud Daled over there? It's a guy who wanted to sell his small field for 100. Couldn't find anybody to buy a small field for 100, but he needs money. So he goes and he sells his bigger field for 200. He has no choice. He has to sell his bigger field. He needs money. And then he's busy chasing the purchaser to pay him the money. So over there it says that the purchaser doesn't acquire the field until he pays the whole amount. Why is that? Because what's the reason why the seller is selling the field is because he wants to buy another field. That's why he's pressured. He's pressured for money now. He's pressured because he wants to buy something else. As long as he doesn't have the money that he wants, he's not going to be able to buy something else. So therefore, the fact that he sold at 200 is also because he had no choice. He needed money. And that's why he's busy chasing it. So for in his mind, as long as he doesn't get paid, there's nothing. There's no kinyan.
By the Taltalin, we get any Shvarat's case?
Taltalin is something else. Metaltalin is a machlokes if Metaltalin do we look at Alef and Afik Azuz or not.
Isn't that the word of the first comments?
Huh?
Isn't that the word of the first comments? We need a...
That's where you're out of Kabbalah to avoid the problem, yeah. Now, by where? By Pnei Ra'asa. We're not talking about Pnei Ra'asa.
No, that's specific Pnei Ra'asa.
Pnei Ra'asa, we say over here that even that if he sells, doesn't give any money, Ayel v'nafek azuzeh, the kinyan happens, right? Huh?
It's a shtar.
Yeah. Now, what does the Mechaber say in Siftas Vav? In Siftas Vav, the Mechaber says that when do we say that by Ayel v'nafek azuzeh, not mipnei Ra'asa, that there is no kinyan? It's when we know that the reason why he sold it is because Taka, he needs the money. Yeah, and even if he makes a payment plan, he sets a specific day, in 30 days from now I'm going to pay you, and the 30 days pass and he doesn't get paid, the Dayan looks at it and says, okay, the reason why he set is still Ayel v'nafek azuzeh. So why did he set 30 days from now? Because he knew 2 months ago that he's going to need money in 2 months. So what did he do? Started working on selling his field. Sold the field this day, made a payment plan that he should have all the money by the time he really needs the money. But it's really Ayel v'nafek azuzeh, that's why he's chasing him. So as long as the Bezdin could determine that, not Pnei Ra'asa, but because he needed the money, and Ayel v'nafek azuzeh, and he's busy chasing the money, then the kinyan is not chal. Then in Sifta Zayin, the Mechaber mentions what's Ayel v'nafek azuzeh. If he goes 2 times, and the first day, when exactly you have to go the first day, the day of the sale, and then go a second time, that's Ayel v'nafek. He goes and he comes back, he asks him for the money, doesn't get paid, goes again. That's Ayel v'nafek azuzeh. Then the Ramah comes and throws in something that seemingly in Sifta Zayin, seemingly is not connected to the Sif. He says, what we said that somebody acquires keneged ma'osav, Yeshayim, it's only if mokim that kesef is kind of below shtar. So seemingly it doesn't belong to this sif. Let's take this a step behind. Yeah, what are we talking about over here? He's talking about a guy that paid part of the money, didn't pay the full price. And then something happened, and he backed out of doing the rest of it. And comes the seller backed out, the buyer backed out. And the buyer says, I paid you for half, I'm taking half. That's it. And there are certain scenarios where it's koine keneged ma'asav, that he will acquire the part which is equal to the amount of money that he paid. So this is what it seems like that Ramah says. That's talking. He says if somebody's he sold you half, he sold you the whole field. You paid him half. Now he's chasing you for the other half. And then, even though when sometimes you could argue that a partial sale is no sale, and let the buyer get back his half of the money and the seller takes the whole field. Sometimes you could say that he's koine keneged ma'asav. So the Ramah says, when could you say such a thing, that a person who paid part of the money purchases part of the land? When it's a kinyan kesef, not a kinyan shtar. The shtar can't be split in half. A kinyan kesef, you could say, it was supposed to be 200 and he paid 100, so half of it became. But if it's a kinyan shtar, the shtar says, I'm buying these 2 acres, and you only paid for half of it, you can't go now and cut the shtar in half. Only when kesef works. If it's a shtar, it doesn't work. Unless he made a condition otherwise. But otherwise, if it's a kinyan shtar, and he gave part of the money, he's not koine anything. Because you can't split a shtar in half. That is the Ramah in Sifte Zayin and Siman Kuf Tzadik. And this is what the Smeh says, that the reason why you have to pay the full amount of money in a place of loy ayal v'nafik azuz, in a place of moicher sadeyu, not mipnei rasa, just sells it, is because, based on the same svara that Ramah brings in Sifte Zayin, that if you paid half of the price, you can't get, you don't get half of the field, you get zero. So obviously, over here, you also will get zero until you pay the whole thing. Comes at Tzemach Tzedek and Piskei Dinim on the Siman, and says, the Smeh mixed everything up. The Ramah in Siman Kuf Tzadik, what is he talking about? One shitta. And over here, the Beis Yosef was something else. The Beis Yosef over here that says that you're not koine without giving the money is based on the Manda Omar and the Ran. The Beis Yosef himself brings the Manda Omar and the Ran. What is it? What does over there it says? There's a Ran which says that if you pay part of the money and to acquire the whole thing in a place where loy ayal v'nafik azuzah, a person sells, not pnei rasa, nothing, loy ayal v'nafik azuzah, a person sells and gets part of the money. The Ran says he's koine. Why? Because the money was given b'teiras kinyan. And if the money was given b'teiras kinyan, so the moicher who's not chasing him, obviously, he's happy with it. And that's the kinyan that he has. So the moicher took the money, is happy with the kinyan. He owes more money. He writes it down as a chayv. No, still the kinyan is full. It's megala das by him not chasing him, that for me the kinyan is full. It's done. You owe me money. You owe me money. We'll figure it out later. Between me and you. But if the Ran says, but if the money was not given b'teiras kinyan, for example, a place that you write a shtar kinyan and not mois, so obviously the money that was given was not given b'teiras kinyan because nobody was samcha daitei on the money, because the kinyan is only performed by a shtar. And the shtar is what makes the kinyan. So then, the partial acceptance of money is not a proof that he was comfortable with the sale. That he was comfortable, gomar daitei, to sell it. And therefore, even if he's not Ayel v'nafek azuzah, even if he's not chasing him, still there's no kinyan until he pays the full amount of money. And a partial star cannot be confirmed. A partial star that's partially confirmed is like a partial star that's partially batul, and partially batul becomes fully batul. That's a shit of the Ran. Which means that if you have that, there are scenarios where it does. The Ran is talking about loy oyel v'nafek azuzim. But the din that partial payment doesn't work by ayel v'nafek azuzah, which the Rama mentions, is the shit of the Nimuki Yosef, but it's dafke by ayel v'nafek azuzah. That's what the Nimuki Yosef says. For the Nimuki Yosef, it's mashma that
Again, the place where it says
the din that the Rama brings from the Nimuki Yosef, not from the Ran. Even though you look in today's in the Manuel Kaimas, they put the Ran also over there, but the Tzemach Tzedek seems to take that the Rama only quotes in the Nimuki Yosef. That the Nimuki Yosef is talking about where ayel v'nafek azuzah, and over there the Nimuki Yosef holds that when he's ayel v'nafek azuzah and he only got paid half, that's when there is no kinyan. Why? Because his actions are showing that he's not happy with the sale. He's busy chasing him for the rest of the money. Until he doesn't get the whole money, he didn't complete the sale. But from the Nimuki Yosef seems like if there was no ayel v'nafek azuzah, and he gave part of the money, he does get it. When there's no ayel v'nafek azuzah. And not like the Ran, that in a place where you write a shtar, partial money even without ayel v'nafek is not a kinyan. According to the Ran, partial shtar means nothing. According to the Nimuki Yosef, partial shtar means nothing only with ayel v'nafek azuzah.
Isn't the Ran the whole
Huh?
Isn't the Ran the whole mafreya?
Yeah.
So that means the kasef was given the king.
No, but only partial. We're talking about partial kesef was given.
But you're saying that Svara is because the kasef wasn't given Mishra Kinyan, but the star is only with mafreya, that means the kasef was given Mishra Kinyan.
Yeah, but the shtar has to be given for the purpose of the shtar is the kinyan, and then it creates that the money which was given before becomes a.
They didn't give L'Shem Kinyan then?
Huh?
When they gave it, it wasn't L'Shem Kinyan?
When he gave it, it wasn't L'Shem Kinyan, but the date of the kinyan goes retroactive to there. Then he says, continues, he says that according to the Rashba, that the Beis Yosef brings, also mashma that if there's no ayel v'nafek azuzah, and there was partial money given, he is kaina. Elamai, there's the Rashba, says not like the Beis Yosef, this is the Beis Yosef misunderstood the Rashba. It says the Rashba is mekel in a scenario when there's another kinyan done, like a kinyan meshicha, that together with mixas kesef works. But otherwise, even by ayel v'nafek. But otherwise, it says if there was ayel v'nafek and there was mixas mammon, you're not kaina. If there was no ayel v'nafek and there was mixas mammon, you are kaina. And not like the Smeh, seems like not like the Smeh who says that in this scenario, where is Moicher Soda not Mipnei Rasa, and there's no discussion about ayel v'nafek or not ayel v'nafek, that you're not kaina until you give the whole money. So the Smeh that wants to say that is trying to match up, bring a proof to the Ran from the Shita of the Nimuki Yosef, which is a contradiction. That's what the Tzemach Tzedek says. He leaves it at that. Now, let's put that aside. That's the Tzemach Tzedek's question, and that's how he leaves it. Huh? Yeah. According to that, yeah. Well, it's because the Tzemach Tzedek disagrees with the way the Beis Yosef understands the Rashba also. What's Mipnei Rasa? Side things. The Mishpat Shalom says Mipnei Rasa means it's Tzarich, he says, but it doesn't have to be both buyer and seller know that Mipnei Rasa. Just next topic. Yeah, this Mipnei Rasa could mean as long as the seller is the one who decided that it's bad, it's already enough for the sale to go through with a shtar without money. But he leaves it tzarich yun. Shanas Yaakov in Sifkot Nalev doesn't have a suffix b'chlal. He says, Mipnei Ra'asa is obviously only for the seller. V'sav Nakasha and Siman Kufayin Hey, when it discusses Bar Metzre, the smell over there brings the das Bal Ha'itur, Smen Sifkot 9 Hey, that Mipnei Ra'asa is that both parties recognize the Ra. He says, that's in Bar Metzre. Over here, what are we talking about? When does a kinyan happen? And what are we talking about? That when does a kinyan happen without money? When the seller samcha daitoi. So, does the buyer have to know it's Pnei Ra'asa? No. The seller who samcha daitoi has to know it's Pnei Ra'asa. The moment the seller already made that decision in his mind and he knows it's Ra'asa and he's selling it because of Ra'asa, it's already enough.
It's only according to the what's it called? Only according to the shita of there's two opinions if it's about the seller, the buyer, or also the buyer. The Rashi, it's only according to Rashi. Sorry, only according to Rashbam. According to Rashi, it's only clear about Mustat and the Lekeh.
Yeah, according to because it seems like from the lashon of the Mechaber, they takes the opinion that it's only mitzad the seller, and that's what he's been dying because it says here not in Kufayne.
No, you said Bar Metzra.
By Bar Metzra, you need both to know it's Pnei Ra'asa. The two brothers, when there's the two sides of the deal. Now to go through another few interesting details connected to the Siman, and we'll finish. The Knesset Agdela, these two Sifim. The Knesset Agdela, the Goy Satur Oischetz brings the name of his Rebbe. I don't remember who it is. What happens if the seller, there's different dinim, if the seller gives money, the buyer get paid for the field, they were a shtar. Yeah, it's not a Pnei Ra'asa. And the Moicher comes and says, yes, I gave you a shtar. You never paid me. You gave me money, but you never paid me. So what does it mean you paid? You never paid you. You owe me a debt. I took that money. You owed me $1 million. I put it for the debt that you owe me from 10 years ago. Setroy. Tiny setroy. So now, what happens over here? The buyer has a paper, a shtar, and he also paid money. And the seller says, you have nothing. So I didn't sell it to Pnei Ra'asa. I sold it because I wanted to make money off you. And now you have a shtar, shkoyach. But a shtar without payment is nothing. So the Knesset Agdela says over there, Sifkot Meches, name of his Rebbe, no, in such a case, Lakeach is Naaman. Can't go that far. If he has a shtar, and he gave money, and the seller is the one who claims Sitroy, that doesn't fly. Sifkot and Tes, he brings in the name of the Ranach, that if the seller didn't sell it, he gave it as a gift. He's not planning on getting any payment for it. He gave it as a gift, the field. And then, for whatever reason, they wrote in the Nusach HaShtar, Nusach Shtar Mechire. They used the wrong shtar or whatever it was. But it's clear to both parties that there's no transfer of money. So it's clear to both parties that there's no transfer of money. The lekeach is kohenet right away. Whether for sure Mipnei Ra'asa, even without Ra'asa. Now, what happens if there's an argument between the buyer and the seller about how much is supposed to get paid for the sale? Yeah, so he brings in Sifkot and Yud, the name of the Ranach, that he has a suffix. Maybe it wasn't kohenet. Because once it starts an argument about the price, so even though you paid, becomes a shaila. Did you pay enough? Did you not pay enough? What? Maybe he didn't want it. Maybe he doesn't want. Maybe there's no completion of sale. Maybe the seller feels that he has to make more money. The buyer feels that he has to pay less money. They're arguing over the price now, even though there's money paid, the shtar was given. He's a suffix. The Ranach is not sure what happens. Now, the Knesset Agdela Nagoyes B'S Yosef Ois Daled brings the name of the...
You just bring this down. It's the same question as before. You get when you mix this down.
Right, does it become Mixas Damim or not? Does it become Mitzvahs Damim? The seller says, you paid me $1 million, that's the full price, and I'm happy. The buyer says, I gave you $1 million, you were supposed to give me 1 acre, I measured the land, it's 3/4 of an acre, you ripped me off, I want $250,000 back. Or, fakat, the buyer says we settled in $1 million, and the seller says it was 1.2. So now the Ranach is a suffix. Because over here it's not that they both agree that it was Mitzvahs Damim. It's a suffix. Not sure if it goes one way or the other. It's also a suffix was the Muchzak. You don't know.
No, if you say Mitzvahs Damim, it's definitely Mitzvahs Damim.
It's definitely so. So if you go based on Mitzvahs Damim, you have a problem, yeah.
If you hold according to the sheet that says that even it's not out of nothing, and it's crazy.
Yeah, that according to the way that Tzemach Tzedek explains it, yeah, it would work out. Yeah. The Knesset Agdila brings the name of the Maribal. Actually, I'm not going to get into it. No. We'll skip that one for now. It's not enough time. Interesting Mata Shimon. Agoy Satur Oizayin, which I read it. I don't understand what he's trying to say. Maybe you guys understand. Maybe it's historical. Maybe Hamnik, you're better at these things. He says over there, Ilavdim Istafina. I would say that today's day and age, all fields are Meicher Pnei Rasa. Whatever that means. As I said, because all our lands are gruim, are bad. I don't know. I have no idea. It lived somewhere in the Middle East, Turkey maybe. I don't know. The Nesivus HaMishpat, Biurim Sifkot and Beis, brings the day of the Marit, Choshen Mishpat Siman Samachei, who brings the Maribal. The Maribal has a suffix. If they both made a Tanai that they're going to make a kinyan only with a shtar. Yeah, that's the Tanai. Tanai was, we're making a kinyan only with a shtar. Money is not part of the discussion. Does it work by Moicher Shalom Pnei Rasa? Because over here we say that kinyan shtar without kesef by a mechira only works by Moicher Pnei Rasa. What is a Moicher Shalom Pnei Rasa? But they made such a deal between them. Does it work or not? That's the first suffix of the Marit, the name of the Maribal. Second suffix of the Marit. What happens? It was Moicher Mipnei Rasa, and they didn't make any deals. What is Moicher Mipnei Rasa? And you paid cash, full amount, and there was no shtar made. Do we over here also say that it works in a place that you're supposed to write a shtar? Place that you're supposed to write a shtar, and you didn't write a shtar. You gave a full amount of money. It's Pnei Rasa. Does it work or not? The Marit says, only on the second one he farent first. He says, this is all the Nesivus brings, Nesivus Biurim Sifkot and Beis, that money without shtar doesn't work. Why? Why does a shtar without money work? Because the Meicher is Samcha Daite. It's Gmiras Das. He wants to sell. He wants to get rid of it. And the Lekeach is also happy. He just purchased a field without paying a penny. And one day he'll pay it. But when money is given without a shtar, then there's no smichus das of the lekeach. It's a place in Makmah Shekos for shtar. There's no smichus das of the lekeach. How could he be koine? Mela, the moicher is happy he got the money, so he's waiving his smichus das on the shtar. But the koine, he's not waiving his smichus das. He gave money for a bad field and has nothing to show for it. So there's no smichus das in such a scenario. So that's how he explains the suffix of the Marit. And he says the second, but regarding the hisna, if he made a condition that you're going to sell with a shtar only without payment, and it's not mitnei rasa, then it doesn't work. And the Siva says that being that the Magid Mishnah and the Beis Yosef clearly wrote that if you make a Tanai that selling a field without payment but with a shtar works, even by Shaloi Pnei Rasa, and they made such a condition, and he says all the rayas of the Marit fall by the wayside. He goes through each raya and he's poirich. Then he throws an interesting comment. He says, therefore, being that we know that by Ayil V'Nofik, every case of Ayil V'Nofik Azuzah, and the full price wasn't paid yet. The Mekach is Nisbato gives an idea, tell the seller that he should apply the whole amount of money that is owed as alva. And now, when he's zakaf al v'milveh, even if it's ayl v'nafak, it's as if he already received the money, and therefore the kinyan is complete. And it gets transferred with a shtar. That's in the civis rights. Yeah. If he doesn't pay, make his bottom.
I don't know if what the estimate is. It's sky.
Ayl v'nafak means that he wants the money, and he's chasing him for the money. And it's not mipnei ra'asa. It's not mipnei ra'asa. And just since we're talking about this, just to add one more nekuda, that you look in Shoshanas Yaakov Sivkot and Beis, since it's connected to this, where he says that if he gave him a mashkin, gave him a mashkin for the money. There's a whole argument if you're kinda with a mashkin or not. But he says, even though a mashkin doesn't work for kinyan kesef, because machloikas rishonim, if you could be kinda, if you acquire the mashkin right away or not. He says over here that the kinyan is not the money. The kinyan is the shtar plus smichus das. So therefore, the mashkin is enough of a smichus das for the seller. So he's for sure completed the sale. And he proves that all the Rishonim, even those that say that by kinyan kesef a mashkin doesn't work, he will say over here in this case, when it's a kinyan shtar, a mashkin would work. Oh well, went over time by 3 minutes.